Hey, old-timer, did you get lost on the way to the bingo hall? The question hung in the hot, stale air of the supply tent. It cut through the low hum of fans and the clatter of boxes. It was a voice full of the kind of pride that only the young and the strong could have. The kind that came from being in great shape and having a chest full of ribbons. Lieutenant Samuel Brooks stood with his hip against a stack of cases. His arms were crossed over his chest. He was the picture of modern special warfare perfection. Sleeves rolled up to show strong forearms, short military haircut, and a look that usually made junior soldiers stutter. But the man he was talking to didn't stutter. In fact, the man didn't say anything at all. Raymond Hayes stood near the counter. His posture was relaxed but not slouching. He looked out of place, a single drop of color in a sea of green and brown Army uniforms. Raymond was wearing a simple royal blue polo shirt tucked neatly into beige pants. He held a worn baseball cap in his hands. His thumbs traced the brim with a slow, rhythmic motion. He was 82 years old with wrinkled skin and eyes that were a watery, pale blue behind thick glasses. "Is this some kind of joke?" Brooks asked, looking around at his teammates for support. A few of them laughed. The sound was nervous but agreeing. They were Navy SEALs, fresh from deployment. They felt invincible and bored while waiting for supplies. They were the top warriors on this base. Seeing a fragile-looking senior citizen standing in a restricted area felt like a mistake in their world. "I asked you a question, sir," Brooks said, stepping closer, getting in the personal space that military discipline usually kept sacred. "Do you even know where you are? This is a restricted supply depot. Regular people aren't allowed past the checkpoint. Did you wander off a tour bus?" Raymond finally moved. He shifted his weight. His old joints made clicking sounds in the silence. He looked up at Brooks. His face was unreadable. There was no fear in his eyes. No anger either. It was a look of deep, bottomless patience. The kind of look a mountain gives to a passing storm. "I am waiting for the quartermaster," Raymond said. His voice was soft and raspy, like dry leaves scraping over concrete, but it carried perfectly in the quiet tent. Brooks laughed, a sharp barking sound. "The quartermaster? You mean Chief Garcia? Garcia is busy handling gear for actual operators, not handing out souvenirs. Look, Pop, the museum is 3 miles east near the main gate. They have a nice little gift shop. Maybe you can buy a commemorative coin there." Raymond turned back to the counter, ignoring the insult. He placed a small folded piece of paper on the metal surface, waiting for the young supply clerk who had disappeared into the back rows of shelves. The dismissal bothered Brooks. He wasn't used to being ignored. He was an officer, a warrior, a man who had kicked down doors in 3 different countries. Being ignored by a man in a royal blue polo shirt felt like an itch he couldn't scratch. He stepped right up to the counter, leaning his elbow on it, blocking Raymond's view. "You know, I'm trying to help you out here before the MPs come and take you away for trespassing," Brooks said, his voice dropping to a fake whisper. "We do important work here. Dangerous work. We don't have time to babysit. Which war were you in anyway, the Civil War?" The other SEALs erupted in laughter this time, louder and more confident. The joke landed. It played into their youth, contrasting their high-tech reality with the ancient presence of the old man. Raymond remained still. His eyes drifted to a patch on Brooks' shoulder, a skull and crossbones patch. It was aggressive, loud, and fierce. Raymond's gaze lingered on it for a second before moving back to the empty spot where the clerk should be. "I was in the one that let you stand here and talk like that," Raymond said quietly. The laughter died instantly. It wasn't a shout. It wasn't said with anger. It was stated as a simple fact, like saying the sky was blue or water was wet. Brooks' smile disappeared. His jaw tightened. The disrespect was clear now. He straightened up to his full height, towering over Raymond by a good 6 inches. "Watch your tone, old man," Brooks warned, his voice dropping lower. "You might have peeled potatoes in Korea or filed paperwork in Vietnam, but you're talking to a United States Navy SEAL. You show some respect to the uniform." "I respect the uniform," Raymond said, his eyes finally locking onto Brooks's. "I just wonder if the man inside it fits." The air in the supply tent seemed to drop 10 degrees. The other soldiers and sailors nearby stopped what they were doing. The background noise of the base seemed to fade away, leaving a spotlight on the fight at the counter. Brooks's face turned deep red. This was no longer just a bother. It was a challenge. And Samuel Brooks did not back down from challenges. He reached out, his hand hovering inches from Raymond's shoulder, planning to spin the old man around and march him out the door personally. "Let me see your ID," Brooks demanded. "Now, or I'm putting you on the ground and waiting for security." Raymond didn't flinch at the hand near his face. He reached into the breast pocket of his royal blue shirt. His movements were painfully slow for the adrenaline-fueled SEALs watching. He pulled out a small leather wallet. It was worn smooth, the edges fraying, shaped by decades of being carried. He opened it and slid a card onto the counter next to his paper. Brooks grabbed the card. He expected a driver's license, maybe a VA card. He looked at it and his brow furrowed. It wasn't a standard ID card. It wasn't the blue retired ID he was used to seeing. It was laminated, simple, and looked like it had been typed on a typewriter. There was no magnetic strip, no chip, just a name, a service number, and a rank that didn't register, immediately because of the formatting. "What is this?" Brooks scoffed, flipping the card over. "It looked like a library card from the 50s. This is expired. This isn't valid ID on a secure base." "It has no expiration date," Raymond said. Brooks tossed the card back onto the metal counter with a clatter. "It's trash. You're trespassing. That's it. I've had enough." As Brooks reached for his radio to call security, the back flap of the tent pushed open. A young sailor, the supply clerk, hurried out, holding a small, heavy box wrapped in wax paper. He looked flustered, sweat on his forehead. "Sorry for the wait. The system was acting up when I punched in the..." The clerk stopped. He saw Brooks looming over the old man. He saw the tension in the room. He looked at the card on the counter, then at Raymond, then at the aggressive posture of the lieutenant. "Lieutenant Brooks, sir," the clerk squeaked. Brooks didn't look away from Raymond. "Not now, sailor. Call security. We have a trespasser." "No, sir," the clerk said, his voice trembling but gaining volume. "You don't understand. I ran the service number on the order form." "I don't care what you ran," Brooks snapped. "Get him out of here." "Sir, the system locked down," the clerk insisted, stepping between Brooks and Raymond, a move that was practically career suicide, but driven by sheer panic. "When I put in this gentleman's service number, the screen went red. It flashed a code Z4. Brooks paused. "Code Z4? He had never heard of it. "That sounds like a computer error." "It's not an error, sir. It's a legacy flag. The screen said to hold position and that the watch commander was being notified automatically." Brooks looked at the clerk, then down at Raymond. The old man hadn't moved. He was just looking at the wax-wrapped box in the clerk's hands with a soft, almost tender look. While the confusion in the supply tent began to boil, a very different scene was happening half a mile away in the base command building. Admiral Jackson was reviewing reports when the red light on his computer began to blink. It was a silent alarm, one that hadn't been triggered in his 5 years of command at this base, a high-priority alert. He tapped the screen, expecting a drill or a system error. The file opened. A grainy black and white photo from the 1960s appeared next to a current scan. The name flashed in bold letters. Raymond James Hayes. Jackson froze. He stopped breathing for a solid 3 seconds. He looked at the location tag. Supply Tent 4. "Admiral?" his helper asked from the doorway, noticing the blood drain from Jackson's face. "Get the car," Jackson said, standing up so fast his chair tipped over. "Get the security detail now." "Sir, what's happening?" Jackson was already grabbing his hat, his movements frantic. "We have a Trident 1 on deck. Do you hear me? A Founder. And he's stuck in the supply tent." The helper's eyes went wide. He grabbed his radio. Jackson didn't wait. He stormed out of the office, his mind racing. Raymond Hayes. The name was a ghost story in the teams. A man who supposedly didn't exist, whose missions were still secret, whose work was the blueprint for the very unit Lieutenant Brooks now served in. Jackson knew the culture of the younger guys. He knew their pride because he had once had it too. And he knew with a sinking feeling in his gut that if Raymond Hayes was standing in a supply tent without an escort, someone was likely disrespecting him right now. Back in the tent, the mood had shifted from mockery to hostility. Brooks felt his authority slipping away, undermined by a nervous clerk and a silent old man. He felt the need to take back control. The code Z4 nonsense was just a computer error. And he wasn't going to let a civilian stand there and smirk at him, even though Raymond wasn't smirking. Look, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, Brooks spat, grabbing Raymond's arm. The grip was tight, designed to scare and control. But you're leaving now. Raymond looked down at the hand gripping his arm. The royal blue fabric bunched under the lieutenant's fingers. For a brief second, the world seemed to tilt. In Raymond's mind, the supply tent vanished. The smell of canvas and dust was replaced by the stench of swamp water and smoke. He wasn't looking at a young lieutenant. He was looking at a jungle in the dead of night, feeling the weight of a wounded brother on his shoulder, the silence essential for survival. He remembered the feeling of being the only thing standing between his team and death. The patience he had learned wasn't from waiting in lines. It was from waiting in mud for 3 days for a target to cross a river. Raymond didn't pull away. He didn't strike. He simply tightened his core. When Brooks tried to pull him, Raymond didn't move. It was like trying to pull a statue rooted in the earth. Brooks tugged harder, confused by the lack of give in the old man's frame. "I would ask you to remove your hand, son," Raymond said. His voice dropped the rasp. It was clear. Cold steel. "Or what?" Brooks sneered, stepping in close, nose to nose. "You going to hit me with your cane?" Brooks raised his other hand to grab Raymond's shoulder, planning to force him physically toward the exit. The line had been crossed. The disrespect had moved from words to physical. Suddenly, the heavy double doors of the supply tent burst open with a crash that shook the walls. "Room attention!" a voice bellowed, cracking with a volume that instantly froze every service member in the room. It wasn't just an MP. It was the base sergeant major, followed immediately by Admiral Jackson and a group of shore patrol officers. Brooks froze, his hands still gripping Raymond. He looked over his shoulder, his eyes widening as he saw the stars on the Admiral's collar. The entire room snapped to attention, except for Brooks, who was caught in the act of grabbing a senior citizen, and Raymond, who stood calmly in the center of the storm. "Lieutenant!" Admiral Jackson roared, his voice filled with a fury that made the supply crates rattle. "Unhand that man immediately!" Brooks released Raymond as if he had been burned. He spun around, snapping a stiff salute, his face draining of color. "Admiral, sir, this civilian was trespassing and refused to identify—" "Silence!" Jackson barked, closing the distance in long, angry strides. The Admiral didn't stop at Brooks. He walked right past the lieutenant, ignoring him completely, and stopped in front of Raymond. The room was deathly silent. The fans seemed to hum louder in the vacuum of sound. Admiral Jackson, a 2-star admiral who commanded thousands of people, slowly and deliberately came to attention. He looked Raymond in the eye, his face shifting from rage to deep reverence. He raised his hand in a slow, sharp salute. It wasn't the routine salute given to an officer. It was the salute given to a legend. "Master Chief," Jackson said, his voice thick with emotion, "I apologize for the delay and for—" Raymond studied Jackson for a moment. Then a small smile touched his lips. He returned the salute, his hand slicing the air with a crispness that didn't match his 82 years. It was a movement of muscle memory, perfect and practiced. "At ease, Admiral," Raymond said. Brooks stood frozen, his hand half raised, his mind unable to process what he was seeing. "Master Chief?" This man was in a blue polo shirt. He looked like a grandfather. Jackson turned slowly to face Brooks. The look on the Admiral's face was terrifying. "Lieutenant Brooks," Jackson said, his voice dangerously low. "Do you know who this is?" Brooks stammered. "No, sir. He had an expired ID. He wouldn't say where he served." Jackson stepped closer to Brooks, getting in his space, just as Brooks had done to Raymond. "This is Master Chief Raymond Hayes. He didn't tell you where he served because the places he served didn't have names on the map when he was there. He didn't tell you which war he was in because he has been fighting a war since before your father was born." Jackson gestured to the room, addressing everyone. "You asked him about the Civil War?" Jackson asked, his voice dripping with disgust. Master Chief Hayes was one of the original frogmen. He was swimming into mined harbors in North Vietnam with nothing but a knife and a pair of shorts, while the rest of the Navy was still figuring out how to fight. He founded the selection course that you just graduated from. The tactics you use, he wrote the manual. The rebreather you train with, he tested the first one. Brooks felt his stomach drop through the floor. He looked at Raymond. Really looked at him this time. He saw the scars on the arms now. Not as wrinkles, but as history. Jackson wasn't finished. Master Chief Hayes is a recipient of the Navy Cross, 2 Silver Stars and 4 Purple Hearts. He is the only living survivor of Operation Thunderhead. He is here today because I personally invited him to collect a replacement for a piece of equipment he lost, saving 3 men's lives 40 years ago. The supply clerk, who had been shaking in the corner, stepped forward slowly and placed the wax-wrapped box on the counter. "Your timepiece, Master Chief," the clerk whispered. Raymond reached out and took the box. He unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a vintage dive watch, battered and scratched, but cleaned and fixed. It wasn't a cheap souvenir. It was a tool of the trade, a relic that had seen the depths of the ocean in the heat of battle. "Thank you, son," Raymond said to the clerk. Jackson turned back to Brooks. "You asked him for ID. You tried to physically remove him. Lieutenant, you are not fit to polish this man's boots. You stand there with your trident pin thinking it makes you a god. This man forged that trident in fire." Brooks was shaking. The shame was a physical weight crushing him. He wanted to disappear. He wanted to dig a hole in the concrete floor and bury himself. "Ignorance is not an excuse for disrespect," Jackson snapped. "You saw an old man, and you saw a target for your ego. You forgot the first rule of this brotherhood: humility." Jackson took a deep breath. "Lieutenant, you are relieved of duty effective immediately. You will report to my office at 800 tomorrow for disciplinary review. Until then, get out of my sight." Brooks opened his mouth to speak, but the look in Jackson's eyes stopped him. "Yes, sir." Brooks turned to leave, but Raymond's voice stopped him. "Lieutenant?" Brooks stopped. He turned around slowly. He couldn't look Raymond in the eye. Raymond stepped forward. He didn't look angry. He didn't look triumphant. He looked sad but firm. "The uniform fits," Raymond said softly, referencing his earlier comment. "The training is there. The skill is there. I can see it. But the man inside, the man needs work." Raymond gestured to the royal blue shirt he was wearing. "You laughed at the shirt," Raymond said. "You asked which war." Raymond paused, his hand resting on the counter near the dive watch. "The wars you read about in books are loud," Raymond said. "The History Channel wars. But the wars that keep you sleeping safe at night, the ones we fought in the dark, they are silent. We don't wear uniforms in those wars. We wear whatever we have to. We wear blue shirts. We wear peasant clothes. We wear shadows." Raymond looked Brooks dead in the eye. "Never mistake silence for weakness, Lieutenant. And never judge a warrior by the brightness of his armor. Some of the deadliest things in the world look like nothing at all until it's too late." Brooks nodded, a jerky, mechanical motion. "Yes, Master Chief. I apologize." Raymond nodded once. "Keep your head down, son, and check your ego at the door. It'll get you killed faster than a bullet." Brooks turned and walked out of the supply tent, stripped of his pride, leaving behind a silence that was heavy and profound. The crowd of soldiers and sailors that had gathered remained still. They looked at Raymond with wide eyes, seeing him for the first time. They didn't see an old man in a blue polo anymore. They saw a titan. Admiral Jackson turned to Raymond, his attitude softening. "Master Chief, my car is outside. I'd be honored if you'd join me for lunch at the mess. The new recruits could learn a lot just by seeing you." Raymond smiled, tucking the dive watch into his pocket. It was the watch he had worn when his team had been ambushed in the Mekong Delta. He had used the crystal to signal the rescue helicopter after his radio was shot out. He had lost it during the escape, and it had taken the Navy 40 years to find it in the mud and return it to him. "I'd like that, Admiral," Raymond said, "but no speeches. I just came for my watch." Jackson laughed, a genuine warm sound. "No speeches, Raymond, I promise. Just good food and bad coffee." As they walked out of the supply tent, the sea of uniformed people parted. Without a command being given, they snapped to attention. It rippled through the room. Army, Navy, Marines, everyone standing tall. As Raymond passed, he didn't look at the ground. He looked at them. He met their eyes. He nodded. He walked with a slight limp, a reminder of a fall from a helicopter in 1968. But his back was straight. The royal blue shirt stood out against the green of the tent as he walked into the sunlight. Outside, the air was fresh. The humiliation of the fight had disappeared, replaced by a sense of restored order. Justice had been swift, but more importantly, a lesson had been taught. In the days that followed, the story of the old man in the blue shirt spread across the base like wildfire. It became a story in the barracks. The young SEALs stopped mocking the veterans who came to the base pharmacy or the store. They started looking at them differently. They started looking for the quiet strength behind the glasses and the canes. Lieutenant Brooks was moved to a training unit, stripped of his team leadership until he completed a leadership course. He spent 6 months scrubbing decks and teaching basic navigation to cadets. It was the best thing that ever happened to him. He learned that leadership wasn't about being the loudest voice in the room, it was about being the steadiest. A few months later, Brooks was at the base store. He saw Raymond again. Raymond was in the aisle with the coffee, looking at the different brands. He was wearing the same royal blue shirt. Brooks froze. He considered turning around and walking away, but he didn't. He took a deep breath, fixed his uniform, and walked down the aisle. "Master Chief," Brooks said. Raymond turned. He looked at Brooks over the rim of his glasses. He recognized him immediately. "Lieutenant," Raymond said comfortably. Brooks stood at ease, his hands clasped behind his back. No pride this time, just respect. "I just wanted to say thank you," Brooks said. Raymond raised an eyebrow. "Thank you for the lesson," Brooks said. "I needed it." Raymond smiled. It was a genuine smile this time. "We all need a course correction now and then, son. Even me." Raymond picked up a can of coffee. "You still deploying soon?" Raymond asked. "Yes, Master Chief. Next month." Raymond nodded. "Keep your powder dry and watch out for the quiet ones." "I will," Brooks said. Raymond patted Brooks on the shoulder, a firm, fatherly pat, and walked toward the checkout. Brooks watched him go, watching the royal blue shirt disappear into the crowd. He realized then that the blue shirt wasn't a sign of a civilian. It was the color of the ocean. It was the color of the deep water where monsters and heroes swam together in the dark. And it was a color he would never disrespect again. Raymond paid for his coffee and walked out to his old pickup truck in the parking lot. He sat in the driver's seat for a moment, looking at the dive watch on his wrist. The second hand swept smoothly around the dial. Tick, tick. He thought about the boys he had lost. He thought about the wars he had fought, and he thought about the young lieutenant inside who was just starting his journey. He started the engine, the truck rumbling to life. He wasn't a hero in his own mind. He was just a man who had done a job, a man who had survived. But as he drove off the base past the young guards who saluted the sticker on his windshield, he knew that the story would live on. Not for his glory, but for their guidance. And that was enough. If you enjoyed this story of hidden bravery and justice, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories about the heroes who walk among us. Share this with someone who respects the silent sacrifice of our veterans.